Okay, so this demonstration is about understanding gradients in Illustrator. Okay, so see, gradients is essentially blending two colors or more colors with each other, and it can be linear in nature. That means it starts from one color, ends at another, and it can also be organic. Organic means you can blend three, four colors within an area also. So I'll show you wherever Illustrator has the options of utilizing gradient in this demonstration. It will be a very short demonstration of not more than 10-15 minutes. So pay attention. Now gradients can also be stored like swatches, and you can see that there are some gradient swatches available also. So first what we will do, we will just use the gradient swatches available to us, and then we will understand how they are created. So I'm going to select it and make sure that fill is prioritized here, and then go to the swatches panel and apply one gradient to it. Now in this we can see that there are two colors, but saying that there are two colors is a little tricky. It can have two colors or it can have multiple colors, right? What we see on the screen shows as if it is a band created between yellow and red, but there are many colors in between also, which can be defined or which can completely be taken out of the gradient, right? So this is one way of applying gradient by selecting the swatch. I can also apply gradient without clicking on the swatch, and that can be done by clicking here, the second option here, which says gradient. So let's first switch to the solid fill, and here we have three options: solid, gradient, and no fill. So if a shape is selected, I can go for solid, gradient. Gradient will remember the last gradient which was applied to any of the shapes. Okay, so quickly you can access to the last gradient applied by clicking on here. Alternatively, I can start creating a new gradient altogether. So for that, you'll have to hit G on the keyboard to switch to the gradient tool, or you just click on this tool here. Now the gradient tool, to apply the gradient tool, you have to click once on the object. Okay, just by clicking once on the object, you can apply the gradient. It will also apply the last gradient it remembers. Okay, and now in this I see that yes, it has multiple color stops. These circles you see, those are color stops. Okay, and in between those circles you see the diamond. Those diamonds are midpoints of those color stops. So this is how the gradient is created. To edit the gradient, you can either click on the color stop, move it, or double click on them to go to the color selector and choose a color of your own choice. And you will see it being filled into that color stop, and you can play around with the midpoint also. The idea here is very simple. Divide the space between two color stops and control that with the help of a midpoint. Okay, you can also change the direction of the gradient. If you hover on the right hand side of this black dot, it will change the cursor into a rotation cursor, and it will allow you to change the direction of the gradient. In this case, it seems as if nothing much is happening, but if I go all the way here, you will see. And if you use the gradient tool, you can interactively do it and then see the changes happening in real time. All right. Okay. I'll just say Control Z to set it back to the normal position. If you want to remove a color stop, you have to click on the color stop and drag it out. That's all you have to do. If you want to introduce a color stop, if the gradient tool is selected, you just have to hover on the gradient line and it will show a plus sign. You just have to click once and then you can double click on that to change the color to a different color of your choice. Okay, in case you have a predefined color in the swatches panel and you wish to fill that here, you can access that by clicking on this, and you can choose a predefined color in the swatches panel as well. Okay, or you can switch on the color picker and then hover within the work area. Outside the work area it will not pick colors, and then you can target any color of your choice. Even if you pick the gray, it will fill that gray. There are some more settings to these colors which we will be able to see in the gradients panel. Now in the properties panel, the gradients panel is limited, and to expand that you'll have to click on that three dot menu which gives us more options. So I'm just gonna collapse it, and rather I'll just pull out a gradient panel for myself by going to the windows and then looking for the gradient panel, which is here. The shortcut is Control plus F9, and okay, here we have the same options which you have seen here while interacting with this gradient given here, but some other options are also available, such as the type of the gradient. We have two options, three options in fact. So linear gradient, radial gradient, and a free form gradient. So the free form gradient is relatively new to the Illustrator, but gives you access to beautiful things. Beautiful things. Earlier it was not possible, and we used to do it with the help of mesh tool. Okay, I'll cover the mesh tool someday else. Right now it's not in the scope of this topic. But mesh tool also helps you create smooth gradients and very organic looking gradients as this one. And here you have the liberty of creating as many as color stops you want. Just have to click once, and then you can double click and then change the color as per your choice. That's a great thing actually.
Is it like linear, or is it circular?
It's circular in nature. It covers an area basically. See, you can click on edit gradient to get the color stops, and then you can work with it. Then you have options of drawing the points or lines. So play around with that. Yeah, and around the path you can apply some colors. So pretty much like mesh tool, right? And you can play around with this path. Switch back to the points also if you want. Control the points, double click, change the color. Very interesting compositions can be created. Okay, now I'll switch back to the linear gradient, and let's see what happens to these color stops we have created. They are all gonna go away, which you had created in this case. If I switch back to the freeform gradient, we will lose out all that information. So be very aware of it. If you have created a freeform gradient, it would be better save that as a swatch before you switch back to linear gradient. Now in the linear gradient, the options which you have per color stop is to be able to control the opacity of that color stop. For example, if I want to go for zero opacity for this one, I can overlap this shape and you will see that the opacity is there, right? Look how it is behaving. Okay, it's letting us see the shape through it. So really interesting things can be created by using the opacity option in the gradients panel. Another thing is that it also allows you to change the location of it, and you could place it in the middle of it by choosing 50%, getting an accurate position for the color stop. Okay, and you also have an option of switching between reversing the gradient. So basically if you want this to come here and so on, you just have to click on this to reverse the gradient. As simple as that. Okay. Now the angle feature can also be utilized with linear gradient and can also be utilized with radial gradient, of course. But in the radial gradient, you have one extra option here, which is to make it more elliptical. And if you have ellipse, then you will be able to control the orientation of that ellipse. Okay, so this is pretty much what is there to look for when it comes to gradients. You also have some presets of the gradients saved, and if you wish to, let's say that you loved this gradient and you want to save it, you have to just click on this to add to the swatches, and you can use the same gradient which you have created. Now this definitely remembers the last one, but let's say that I have created 5 6 gradients and I want to save all of them. I have the choice of saving them in the swatches panel. Very simple. Okay.
You did not save the elongation.
No, it will not save the elongation. That's very that is subjective to every time you apply it on a shape. You'll have to do that manually. It will not save this.
Now we have
This
to
panel.
get the handles back. How do we get them?
Which handles back?
The editable. Like I want to drag it manually. Like
Here, so all you have to do is switch to the gradient tool and you'll get those handles back. Okay.
this used to be the problem.
Yeah. Got it? Any question? No questions? Okay. Now see what happens if I change the size. The gradient also comes along with it. Okay. What if I change the rotation? This also rotates along with it. What if I distort the shape? So in this case also the gradient also is getting affected. Okay, so gradient is pretty much related to the shape you are applying it into. So say control K and look for any option where it says gradient, and you will not find any options. Okay, so what that tells us, that gradient is a property of the shape, same as the solid fill. Okay,
Pattern was also a fill.
pattern was a fill, but it was created in a different way. The pattern tiles were not the property of the shape, at least unless you say it explicitly that it is the property, right? Which could be done by ticking on this option, transform pattern tiles. So this is gradient. Okay, all right.